Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and today's video is going to be a really good one. PaizoCon came out with so much interesting information about the books to come, pretty much up through spring of next year and maybe even beyond, that there's honestly so much that I didn't catch everything. And honestly, from every resource I've been using and looking through, not everyone caught everything as well. But if you do want to see some of that information, I do recommend checking out our Discord, linked in the description below. In the Pathfinder 2e build channel, one of the people, Easy Does It channel member, and who does a lot of stuff in the tabletop community as well, did do a lot of like the AMA and the Paizo Discord spoiler stuff as well, so you can look there. I looked through all of that, but I feel like today I just want to talk about mostly what happened during the panels at PaizoCon, and maybe some of the spoilers and something else, or maybe we'll talk about that later this week during Table Talk, which, if you want to catch that, by the way, I recommend subscribing to the channel so you'll be notified, hopefully, when we're going live. And as well, we are on at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we go for about 2 hours, give or take. So let's go ahead and talk about what dropped in the panels and what information I have for you. So first, there's the opening keynote. Now, the opening keynote had a lot of bits of information here and there. I moved those to different parts of this video just so that it made more sense for the sections that they contained, but I do want to mention at least some of the little things that came out that weren't necessarily like super relevant, or just to make those sections a little bit nicer. So first of all, we heard the next book is actually called Battle Cry. We had the Battle Cry playtest, and it seems like the book, as far as I'm aware, is going to be called Battle Cry. So that's the one with the Commander and the Guardian coming out. This book also will have some rules for things like mass combat. So if you want to lead armies, if you're very excited for anything along those lines, like siege warfare and all that kinds of stuff, Battle Cry is going to be the book for you. And by my estimate, it'll probably be releasing sometime next summer. They also made some mentions relating to the Player Core 2. If many of you remember, after Player Core 1, there was an errata that was put out that kind of helped bring some of the classes more in line with the remaster. But honestly, since then, since Player Core 1 essentially, they've done a lot more revisions. So some of the errata from Player Core 1 to kind of help bring like the champion into line with the remaster have undergone some more major changes. And so I wouldn't consider that errata to be perfect for when Player Core 2 releases. Obviously, Player Core 2 is going to take precedence. So it's exciting to hear that there's a lot more coming out in Player Core 2, and the Player Core 2 section is probably the biggest section I have for this video, so no worries, but it's exciting to hear that we're getting more. And I will also make mention of it. This was asked during some of the AMAs on Discord. There's not currently a plan for Player Core 3 for things like Secrets and Magic or Guns and Gears. Guns and Gears just got a really good errata that helped a lot of things. Secrets and Magic really got hit hard by the remaster in a lot of ways. And there's some features of like the Magus, for instance, or even the Summoner a little bit, that don't really mesh well moving forward. So that being the case, they're probably going to just hit those in a big errata, or they might move some of those kind of features to future releases where they talk about those kinds of subjects. It's really not, they're really unsure at this time, but they really don't seem like they want to do a Player Core 3, but they will if enough people demand it. So, you know, take that as you will. I'm not going to tell you to go bother the Paizo staff to make a Player Core 3. I think some errata will do just fine. We also got some interesting information from the Tian Xia character guide and other things, where they talked about like the Wei Yang and how they have the ability to puppet people's shadows in order to make them do things, which is very kind of cool. They also mentioned coming out in, I believe it's actually coming out in War of Immortals, or it might be in Player Core. No, I think it's War of Immortals. They have the familiar sage archetype. This archetype allows for a familiar to buff characters and their companions, getting all kinds of new and interesting abilities, and as well being kind of somewhat tied to the familiar master archetype as well. So pretty much we're now getting even more familiar options, and to go along with that, in War of Immortals, we're going to be getting new familiar options as well as new animal companion options. And I do believe actually the Tian Xia character guide is also coming out with such options as well. So if you love familiars and animal companions, there's a lot coming out here soon. Also, they did make mention that in Divine Mysteries, they're going to be talking over some rules of mysticism, where characters who are not necessarily religious, but pious in some way, don't have to worship God specifically, but can worship more concepts, which is really nice. It helps diversify character options, especially in a world with gods just being like a thing, like a fact. It's kind of hard to not worship gods in some way. So I feel like with Divine Mysteries, getting these mysticism kind of rules is actually going to make the world very interesting. And I'm very interested to see how they kind of or what kind of direction they take this mindset in. Moving on from the opening note, we dove right into the Starfinder 2E panel, more or less. And I gotta say, it's looking really good. If you like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you're going to like Starfinder 2nd Edition. They're so similar, yet different in their own ways. But one of the similarities is definitely how some of their classes are designed. So they first talked about how the operative, which they focused the operative more as like the base gunner. And as you can see here, here's kind of like the front page layout for the operative. And well, you can easily see that they're very similar to how Pathfinder classes are done. Something that's very exciting, and of course, if you are an enjoyer of the operative, this is going to be something that I'm sure is going to be very interesting to you. And as well, they do have they're going to actually be selling copies of the Starfinder 2 hardcover playtest. It is a full book. It's not the final book, but it's something that, it is a physical thing. You can buy it and, have that, and the art looks really good for it. I'm super excited for Starfinder, and I will start covering Starfinder content more here on the channel, especially around the time of Gen Con when they're going to be releasing the playtest. So I'll be looking into playtests, and I'll try to do some research as well back into Starfinder 1 so I can get at least some basis. But I played a little bit of Pathfinder first edition, but I started second edition more or less just completely unaware of the majority of what was in Pathfinder, and I intend to kind of do the same thing with Starfinder, because honestly that's going to be a trek many of you are probably going to be taking as well, so something to definitely check out. Then they also, in the playtest, they're going to have 126 spells. And I believe I have art for the spells here. You can see some of the new options. It's very interesting, very exciting. I find some of these to be really, really cool. There's also mention of versatile heritages, but versatile heritages will not be found in the playtest. So in Starfinder 2nd Edition, they are playing with the idea, but I don't believe they're actually going to be in the playtest itself. But it is interesting. If anyone knows anything about Starfinder 1st Edition, your race essentially was a huge aspect of your character. It was different than kind of how Pathfinder did it. And now that they're adding versatile heritages, I'm very interested to see if we're going to have such an expansive list of ancestries, or if they're going to cut it down for the sake of versatile heritages. Honestly, I don't know, but I think it's very interesting. There's also some talk about some of the other classes coming out, like the Witch Warper. If you were familiar with first edition, there's also a precog, and Witch Warper kind of took precog in, and now Witch Warper have some of the same similar features. They have paradoxes and anchors. Paradoxes kind of let them have access to their unique abilities, and anchors stop them from necessarily going too far out into the endless unknown, more or less. So a type of spellcaster, it's going to be very cool and very, very interesting for a lot of people. They also mentioned that there's going to be some connections to the War of Immortals storyline that's going to affect Starfinder 2nd Edition, which I think is really cool. Now, they are still going to be two different continuities, so they're not going to necessarily have the same lore, but there are going to be some interactions between the two, which I think will be very interesting. Also, starting off with the playtest, there's actually going to be 2 adventure paths that they're going to release in tandem with it, so you can get a full spread. First is a low-level adventure path called Cosmic Birthday, and this is going to be about the birth of a new god essentially hatching from a planet. I believe it's called Athrun. and it's going to have some major implications for the events happening in Starfinder 2nd Edition. So it's going to be an AP you're going to want to check in if you care about the lore and the current setting of Starfinder 2nd Edition. So it's something that's very, very cool. The art for it is also very beautiful. We also have another one called Empires Devoured. This is a higher level adventure path if you want to try the high end of Starfinder. And this is about some new aspects of war is going to be a big part of 2nd Edition. So you can see how it kind of ties into War of Immortals. And there's going to be the Aslanti Empire, and they're also going to have some new factions inside of them. One that was mentioned was the Sahedron Guard, who apparently are very punchable fascists. So that's very interesting. So if you're interested in the Aslanti faction and some of the war stuff, this is an AP you're going to want to check out, and as well also very tied into the current events that are going to be going into the Starfinder 2nd Edition universe. So that being the case, very cool. Starfinder is coming out swinging for Gen Con, which will be out early August. So after Gen Con, then everyone else will get a chance to see the playtest stuff, and it's going to be very, very cool. And I will start covering Starfinder at that time. So if you want to say, tuned into that, keep an eye on the channel. Some other small things about Starfinder as well. They definitely have some interesting ideas for how like certain hazards and stuff get done. They did mention that during one of the adventure pass, there was like hazards you had to get by, and you could possibly using gambling lore. They are also adding lore and recall knowledge in similar ways. They also have some ways to use recall knowledge as a free action, which is very cool. But yeah, gambling lore or praying to your god to make it stop. My favorite quote is, "Pray to your god to make it stop," is a really interesting hazard. So they got some really interesting ideas coming out for Starfinder 2nd Edition. They did say much more news is going to be coming out, obviously, during Gen Con about what they're doing, obviously with the release of the playtest, but we'll probably also be hearing about more what they're working on. Some other things as well is they're overhauling ship combat. It's probably not going to be releasing in the actual like full core release, but they are working on overhauling ship combat. They're testing out all kinds of different ways to use ship combat. So if you're interested in ship combat or mech stuff, as they also talked about Mechageddon, the final big release they're doing for 1st edition or Starfinder, then you're going to want to keep an eye out for it. But like I said, it's probably not going to release right away. They're probably going to have their own book shortly after. So that's something that you're going to definitely want to keep in line. They also did a Q&A at the end. People were asking about how multi-arm characters are going to come up, and they are going to be tested in the playtest. So multi-arm characters are going to be available in the playtest, and as well, we're going to be getting a lot of feedback on how that works. So that's going to be something interesting. And of course, like they understand that a lot of, popular races, ancestries now have multiple arms. So that being the case, it's something where, they're playing around with it. They're trying to see more about what they're doing with it. And honestly, they also showed a panel of their feats, and something I've really noticed, and they have kind of combat feats in what's essentially general skill feat areas. So I don't think we're going to be getting a similar leveling style as to Path, or at least it is going to be similar, but not in exactly the same way. And there's going to be more combat actions that any character has access to in this setting from generally what you can gather from this page here. So that being the case, I'm very excited for Starfinder to kind of shake things up a little bit. Let's see a new remix of the Pathfinder, at least core like skeleton. And maybe this will be a good opportunity for other people who are looking to use the Pathfinder 2e skeleton to build their own systems, which I'd be very happy to see. They also talked about weapon advancement, and they're kind of bringing it in more in line with all weapons. So now all weapons are kind of more balanced with each other rather than like having different kinds of laser pistols, some just being better than others. Now all laser pistols are more or less the same with the normal advancement as they normally had, like getting up to the highest levels. So something along those lines is pretty cool. And that's pretty much all we have for the Starfinder sub. Next, we're going to move on to the War of Immortals. So The War of Immortals stuff, and this includes Divine Mysteries and all that, is jam-packed with all kinds of information. They began off with Michael Sayer kind of talking about some of the new options and stuff, like the new class archetypes that are going to be in it, like there's 5 coming out specifically. There's the Avenger, the Vindicator, the Seneschal, the Blood Rager, and the Warrior of Legends. And he went a little bit more into the Avenger multi-class archetype for the Rogue. And it's nothing like anything that was in first edition. It's very, very different now. He wanted to really emphasize it's not quite the same. This is a very different route. Honestly, I would have to quote the whole thing to really give the whole story. So I do recommend going out. You can go onto Twitch right now and you can check out the panels as they came out. But more or less, the new class archetypes are very interesting. And as you can tell by many of the names, they all have something to do probably with some kind of, god or religious style of things. So that being the case, it's going to be really cool. And that's not even including the archetypes that they were talking about releasing. Like there's a new Razmiran priest archetype, which is very cool. If you don't know Razmir is the kind of like the fake god. He's this dude who goes around and wears a mask. And he's kind of been building up this religion around him, trying to generate his own godhood, more or less. And now we have an archetype base around that, which is very, very cool. Michael Sayer also went into the mythic rules, talking about the variety of new mythic options. Like we have mythic spells, mythic rituals, and as well how the mythic destinies work. So mythic destinies, there's kind of like a generic mythic character levels. This kind of works similarly to archetype, as in you level simultaneously with your class, and you get that up to level 10, and then at level 10, you select a destiny that you go down, like the Apocalypse Rider, or it was the Arc Fiend. So for those who are like, oh, there's no reason why, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's the Arc Fiend. There, I looked it up for you. Happy? It's super not relevant, but whatever. I'm just being annoyed at people in the comments. Don't mind me. Anyway, so yeah, and after level 10, you get your Mythic Destiny, and then you get new unique powers. And a lot of these are kind of based on some of the, Destiny Pass from the Wrath of the Righteous video game. So if you ever played that video game, there is some touches of that, which is super cool. It gives you these kind of themes for your characters to run down. It's very, very awesome. And as well, there's new mythic threats and mythic monsters that they're going to be talking about, including like actual kaiju. So not just huge creatures, but like actual larger than life creatures the size of cities that we're going to be able to fight, which is going to be super cool. Also new mythic templates that you can add to characters. And there's been a lot of misconceptions. So mythic levels are not a 20 plus. Mythic levels are in addition to your character levels, similar to how the free archetype rule works. And in addition, we're also getting things like mythic proficiencies, where there are certain things that your character can do at an unreasonably good level. So you're going to be able to do some things really, really well. So there's definitely a lot coming in, and they're definitely giving us threats. Mythic monsters are also not necessarily 20 plus. Mythic monsters, like a mythic monster is just a much more powerful version of a creature at the same level. So you can consider them having a higher level difficulty while still being the same level as other creatures of its level. So a mythic creature versus a non-mythic creature, the mythic creature will almost always win because they have more abilities and more like impact they can do rather than a standard creature of their level and type. So that's something that's very interesting, and it gives a new way to add like boss monsters essentially to games where your group is very, very powerful, or you've given them power. Now we have a better way of dealing with that, which I think is very cool. They also talked about the adventure paths that are going on, and they talked more about the death of Gorham. So one thing specifically is they showed art here that I'm going to show of the death of Gorham, which is pretty insane. We have Akchek there dealing what seems to be the killing blow, and this is actually all going to take place during Pray for Death, the book that's going to be coming out, I believe, in August or July. I don't remember which. It really doesn't matter. It's coming soon. You can find it on the Paizo website. And it's very, very cool. It's something that there's going to be all kinds of stuff around. And the new multi-part adventure path, Curtain Call, is going to be taking place before, during, and after the effects of Pray for Death. So that being the case, we have some really good adventure paths that are covering this angle of the War of Immortals and the death of Gorham in multiple ways, which is insanely cool. It's something I'm very excited about. I'm not a big AP runner myself. I just do my own stuff, and honestly, I do best with my own homebrew kind of setting. But this stuff like this is still really cool, and it's something I'm definitely want to check out at some point in the future if I can do so in my super busy schedule. Now, moving on to some more stuff from the Divine Mysteries part of the God's Reign panel. They introduce more concepts around, like, first of all, gods can have pantheons, but they can also have covenants, which is a new type of, I guess, pantheon that gods can be a part of. And there was also information about how Torag is kind of how he's associated with the things currently going on with the orcs. In addition, he's also leaving the God's Claw, which is insane. A new god is actually replacing Torag in the God's Claw, which is very interesting. And he's actually going to be joining a covenant called the Good Neighbors, which is very weird, very interesting. A lot of stuff is going to be happening with Torag, which is very, very cool. And there's a lot of things that are very interesting. And sadly, Luis didn't get to talk a lot about Divine Mysteries, I guess because a lot has already been kind of coming out. So there wasn't too much more that I felt was super necessary to look into. But Luis Loza, the creative director for Paizo, did talk about the Mortal Herald, which is a 12th level archetype. So even higher than some of the other archetypes that require high levels. And it leans into some of the more mythic rules. And as you can see from the art here, it kind of goes really hard as you play a mortal character who is working as essentially a mortal herald, as the name implies, of a god getting godlike abilities, or at least demigod-like abilities. It's super cool, very, very interesting, and something I'm very much looking forward to. And I guess while there wasn't really a lot in the Divine Mysteries section of the panel, Luis did talk about some of the new gods coming up, so I'm going to show some images here. I'm not going to get super into it. It's just something that I figured that y'all would like to see the art for. I'm very excited. I mean, Divine Mysteries also had just a lot of things going on as well. And Gods and Magic was one of my favorite books from Lost Omens, so this is going to be a very great book, in my opinion. So definitely check it out. I will be covering it here on the channel. Divine Mysteries will be coming out in November, and War of Immortals will be coming out in October. So the end part of this year, we got a lot of really good stuff coming out. Next up is the Remaster panel, and this is a big section. I have a lot going on here, so I'm going to try my best to condense this in a way that makes the most sense. First, they started talking about the ancestries, especially the kobolds. The kobolds are definitely moved away from being just tied to dragons specifically, and now they're more tied to being like they're more tied to just worshiping any creature who's super powerful and kind of siphoning some of their power from those entities, which affect their lineages and some of their feats as well. They did mention like the elemental heart kobold, which is going to be much more magically attuned in to various magical things, and probably similar to the elemental heart dwarves who have similar features. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with the kobolds specifically, as I find that this new route is going to make them very dynamic, and a lot of people love kobolds, so it's going to be really good. They also mentioned that the Tengu are just going to get more feats than they originally did, and they're going to get more feats based on their folklore, and they even get full flight earlier, as they're kind of bringing any ancestry that has a tie to flight into like the same line, where now essentially if you spend all your feats on it, you can get flight at level 9. So that being the case, not something I enjoy personally. I don't like a bunch of feats that kind of just are a prerequisite to get one feat that just does the other feats but better. Like, I want each feat to build onto a character, and I don't like the idea of sacrificing 3 feats for just flight. But it is what it is. Everyone says, oh, well, flight's really powerful. Yeah, I agree. I would probably take something else other than flight at this rate, just because I feel like I'm spending 3 feats just to get flight, where I could be using at least 2 of those other feats to do other things. Regardless, if that's something you really want, it's going to be present here in the Tengu as well. So if you're a Tengu lover, which I actually do like Tengu as well, this is going to be really fun for a lot of people. They also really went in depth with the dragon-blooded characters. This is a new versatile heritage that they're adding into Player Core 2, and it's going to be taking a lot more of the dragon feats that we saw from like Dragon Disciple and other dragon-related feats. There's even been some talk that they might not even have Dragon Disciple in, as they're going to be removing some of the more OGL tied archetypes out of the book. Probably Dragon Disciple and maybe even Eldritch Archer, if I was to hazard a guess, but they didn't say anything quite so much in the panel. But the Dragonblood characters are going to be a character that's very dynamic and versatile. You can play them in a lot of different ways, and how dragonified your character is going to really be up to you. They also have 4 lineages that you can, spec your feats into that tie to each of the traditions of dragons specifically. And, well, you're going to get anything dragon you like is going to be introduced here. And this is going to be a really good option for a lot of characters. A lot of people who do like the idea of having dragons associated with their character in some form or fashion are absolutely going to be loving the dragon-blooded ancestry or versatile heritage. And it's going to be really, really good. I can only see great things coming out of this particular versatile heritage. Then they moved into the classes, and this is, I think, the thing that you're all most excited about. The classes are, obviously, some of them are going to get more changes than others. They started off with the Alchemist. So the Alchemist got a pretty decent rework overall. They still have the ability to make alchemical items at the beginning of the day, but they also gained, rather than quick alchemy, they now have versatile vials. Versatile vials allow them to do, well, a wide variety of things, and they're going to be the thing that you can use to transform into different kinds of bombs. Now, each of the types of alchemists, depending on what kind of field of discovery you go into, can throw the versatile vial as just a bomb in itself, which is kind of cool. But they can each also turn these versatile vials into something unique, like poisons for the toxicologist, for instance, or for, healing potions for the chirurgeon. So they also can be replenished during the day. So essentially working similar to focus points. So you're essentially going to always have alchemy throughout the entire day, where low-level alchemists definitely very much struggled with this factor. This has been made much more simple. And this is something that I think is a very good move, and it makes alchemists a lot easier, because now you're not just juggling everything. You're not juggling your reagents with how much you're using at the beginning of the day versus how much you're using with quick alchemy. We're now just getting those two things separated, where at the beginning of the day, you can make so many alchemical items, and then throughout the day, you can use versatile vials to make specific types of alchemical items. So I think this is going to be a lot easier and easier to maintain, and also it just makes low-level alchemist a lot better. So if you like alchemy, this is something that's going to be much more helpful, and as well, they're also tuning the individual fields to get more unique items and abilities. For instance, they mention new feats like the mutant physique or mutagenic physique, which gives you special buffs when using some of the mutagens like Quicksilver mutagen or the bestial mutagen, for instance. So Alchemist is now going to feel better when using these kind of things. And for the mutagenous, like everyone has been harping on over and over, now they're going to get special feats that give them bonuses under these effects. I'm sure it's going to give them like an item bonus to their attacks, or maybe a status bonus to their attacks, or something like that. Now, during the AMAs on Discord, they did not want to talk about specifically the alchemist's proficiencies. Since they're not talking about alchemist proficiencies, I'm going to assume alchemists are going to maintain the same proficiencies that they currently have, but feats like mutant physique are going to allow them to essentially get buffs to make up the difference. So if you're a mutagenist specifically, you're going to be able to be similar to a martial character when under the effects of your mutagen. But that's just hearsay. Unfortunately, they just said they didn't want to talk about it because they feel that it will be taken out of context, and they can't provide the full context of the book during the AMA. So that being the case, I have a feeling they're going to maintain the same proficiencies, but now things like mutagenous are going to be able to, get certain bonuses, and Bomber will probably also get certain bonuses whenever they use like their vial to make a certain type of bomb. That bomb will get a higher bonus. I don't know. There's a lot going into it, but I feel like Alchemist is going to be better, and it's been made much simpler as you don't have to manage as much. And the vials themselves can be bombs, which makes them easier to use. So that being the case, Alchemist got a lot of really good changes, and I'm really looking forward to Player Core 2. I will be going over, by the way, all the class and all the changes in Player Core 2 here on the channel, like in depth, everything that changed from the first, the Legacy Edition to now. So that being the case, I recommend subscribing if you haven't up until this point, because I'm going to be covering absolutely everything. Next, they talked about the Barbarian. The Barbarian did actually get a little bit of tuning up. Barbarians can now rage multiple times in a fight. It was always unfortunate when a character would go down, and then when they popped back up, they would no longer be able to rage and lose like all their class features. So now Barbarians will be able to rage multiple times, though they will gain an immunity to the temp HP they can get from rage, which will probably be like every 10 minutes. So you can only gain the temp HP once per fight, essentially, from rage. And also, they're planning on implementing a feature that I don't know if it's going to be at level 1 or it's going to be something they're going to pick up that lets them rage as a free action when they roll initiative. So when you roll initiative, you'll now be able to rage right away, being able to get the many benefits of rage, and it just will feel a lot cleaner and allow for a lot more of the abilities of Barbarian to go right at the beginning of combat. So a lot of people were very happy about that. I thought Barbarians were generally fine before. I mean, rage damage is insanely high, like insanely good and insanely high. So I felt like it was balanced, but now Barbarians just get to rage as a free action when they roll initiative, which is going to make them even more deadly. So Barbarians are going to be eaten well today or during the Player Core. Also, Fury Barbarians, they're going to get some extra buffs so that their damage is probably going to be a little bit better, and they're also going to get some unique features and feats to make them better as well. So they're giving essentially a buff to Fury Barbarians to make them more in line with the other Barbarian instincts, which I think is really good. Barbarians are also getting a new feat called Desperate Wrath that is going to allow them to lower their defenses even more to gain an accuracy bonus. So, it might be a +1 and reducing their AC by 2 again, or something along those lines. So Barbarians will be able to fully go full ham on kind of the relying on my HP to keep me alive playstyle, and they're going to be even more deadly. So I'm very much looking forward to Barbarians, and I'm sure Barbarians are going to be super impactful for a lot of people. Next up came the Champion. Champion is getting one of the biggest reworks, considering all the changes with the, no longer having alignment damage. Now, they did mention specifically that sanctification, and if you're unaware, sanctification is something that makes your character holy or unholy. And there's many fears that champions had to have sanctification, meaning you couldn't pick gods that didn't have it. That is no longer necessary. So the champions no longer require sanctification, though sanctification will be tied to certain causes, and you will need them to play those causes. As well, they talked about 2 of the new causes, the Grandeur cause and the Justice cause, though they didn't really go too much into either of these. But they spent a lot of time talking about how a champion is now more flexible. They're more based on what you could do, how you could interpret your path, your route, essentially, your god's anathema and their edicts, and how your character plays themselves as well. Since it doesn't seem like we're going to be having the tenets of good and tenets of evil anymore, and instead it's going to be shifted into this much more like slightly ambiguous, like obviously justice is something that's more in line with doing something that is lawful, but it's not always lawful. Actions are not always just, or so far and so forth. So they wanted to add that level of flexibility, which does make a lot of sense. So that's going to be very interesting. Champions also just now have a constant aura effect, and this is what is going to be the basis of their champion reaction. So now it's going to be any targets affected by your aura rather than just being a certain distance of your character. They didn't really go too much into this part, unfortunately. So that's kind of just all that we were left with. But it more or less, your champion reactions are going to be tied to your champion's aura now, which is going to be kind of cool. They also said and emphasized several times that champion is going to feel more actiony. So champion is going to seem to have more actions to do on their turn rather than just waiting for a reaction to do anything, which is very good. They also mentioned that Divine Ally has been removed and it's actually going to be replaced with Blessings of the Devoted. Now, there are still going to be options that allow you to get like special weapons, special shields, but your the Divine Steed is now not going to be a part of your general class features, and instead, champions are just going to get the Animal Companion feats in their normal feat line. So obviously, like similar to other classes, though they are going to have certain blessings tied to feats that you could select probably through some other feats as well. So that being the case, there's so much being adjusted for champion as far as like a lot of their features, like no more divine allies. Essentially the causes are getting a big shakeup. The edicts and anathema that you have to follow, like the tenets, are getting all changed. So there's a lot of base core stuff to the champion that has been changed. And there was also a mention of the litany and oaths feats are not going to be coming out in player core 2, but oaths have been confirmed to be in the new divine mysteries, which is really good. So if you're a big fan of litanies and oaths, unfortunately, you're not going to be seeing these at least until Divine Mysteries, which won't be until November. But other than that, champions are getting a big facelift in a lot of areas. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot to chew through before we get to Divine Mysteries anyway. They also talked about Investigator a little bit. Investigator, the Pursue a Lead has been cleaned up a little bit and has been brought in line more to other kind of recall knowledge type of checks and abilities. So Pursue a Lead is no longer going to be hopefully a big wall of text, and now it's going to be a little bit easier for, mostly just use with recall knowledge and such similar checks. As well, they talked about how Devise a Stratagem is being changed, where now it will apply special benefits to either strikes or to skill checks. So now, in addition to benefits to your striking ability, if you decide that you don't want to strike or you're unable to strike, it's no longer a waste to devise a stratagem, and now you can apply it to skill checks as well to gain certain benefits there, which I think is really cool. So devise stratagem getting a little bit of a facelift is very nice. A lot of people don't like it, even though I felt that Investigator was fine before. I'm always happy to see my favorite class get some adjustments. And as well, they were talking about how some of the methodologies are going to be changed a little bit as well to get some more active features and be more of an actual part of the class. They did mention that the medical one, I can't remember at this moment, was going to have more of the ability to like debuff enemies with their devised strike, with their surgical precision and all that kind of stuff, with some abilities similar to how rogues do it. So that being the case, Investigator just getting cleaned up in a lot of ways, devised stratagem getting made better, and the mythologies being more impactful is just a lot of good things. Monk is going to be relatively unchanged, though they are getting some changes. For instance, now monks are just going to be able to get their weapon critical, or the unarmed, I guess, critical specializations just without, just as they are, without needing to pick up a feat for it, which is very nice. Also, monastic weaponry seems to be getting squished together with the ancestry version of it. So now you don't need to take 2 feats to use your ancestry weapons with monastic weaponry. When you select the monastic weaponry feat, it also applies to any ancestry weapons that you have access to. So that's also really cool, and honestly just cleans them up a little bit. Then we went to Oracle. Oracle is also getting a lot of changes as well. So they were mentioning how the curse is more of an opt-in type of thing. And it's something I missed, and I tried looking over it, and it was kind of hard to talk about, or kind of hard to parse through the information that they were talking about. But essentially how the new curse-bound effect works is you get this new curse-bound condition. And now the curse-bound condition is increased with your focus spells. Now, they're still going to have the same focus spells or similar focus spells that they did before, which are still going to be kind of powerful. But then the curse-bound features are now going to be tied more to specific types of spells or feats that they gain access to. These feats are going to be a huge buff and power, some of them very good. There's one they talked about specifically that you could only use while you were unconscious and in the dying, with a dying condition, essentially. You were kind of down and out. And what it does is it gives you the benefits of the augury spell, and you get a healing and pop up as a free action as well. So a very powerful effect, and many of their feats are going to be similar to this. So the Oracle is now going to have lots of magical-esque feats that give them some really cool abilities. One they even mentioned was the ability to increase your curse-bound condition, but you can use certain spell shapes as a free action rather than as an action. So things like the widening or reach spell shapes, for instance, are now going to be free actions for oracles as long as they're willing to increase their curse-bound condition, which is going to be really cool and is going to make oracles incredibly powerful. They also are expanding the oracles' domain access that they got through their mysteries. So now all oracles will get 4 domains tied to their mysteries rather than 2. They said they were doubling the amount of domains associated with these mysteries, so that's why I have to assume the way they're going to go with it. So yeah, it's something that oracles are now going to have. They're really good focus spells that they can use without getting cursed, and even more powerful feats that they can use while getting cursed. And the curse condition still is the same. It goes from 1 to 4, though you can't get to certain high levels until later in the game, similar to how it was done before. And they're definitely doing some retooling around with the various mysteries, the mysteries around each of the oracles. So that being the case, hopefully we're going to see some interesting effects. The curse-bound condition is probably going to be a lot more negative than it was before, but now it's more of an opt-in feature, and now you get to trade power for essentially these downsides rather than just now I'm cursed for the rest of the day kind of effects that they had before. So Oracle does seem to be a lot better and is going to be a lot more interesting to play. Sorcerer, sadly, is just not getting a lot of changes. Paizo really likes how Sorcerer is the very simple and straightforward class to play, so they're not getting too much, but they did make special mention that the sorcerers are going to get more blood magic effects. So more effects that affect their blood magic, which hopefully will make them seem a little bit better. Honestly, if they can just make blood magic interesting and good, that will be all most people will need from the sorcerer anyway. So, sad to hear that they're really not getting much retooling or anything, but hopefully the changes to blood magic is definitely going to be worth it. Swashbuckler is also getting a little bit of a facelift a bit. They have a new trait that they get on some of their feats called Bravado. And whenever they use a feat that has Bravado, it gives them Panache if they don't already have it. So Panache is going to be something that is going to be much more accessible to swashbucklers. And it's something that they were talking about how it was never fun when you had to get a skill check on like a boss in order to get your Panache off. So that's what the use of the Bravado feats are. And they're also getting some new feats. One of the more interesting ones was the Switcheroo, where if you're being attacked by a range attack and you're adjacent to an enemy, you can switch places with them, causing them to take the attack instead, which I think is really cool. And it sounds like they're going to be a lot more focused on, maneuvering and ability. And as well, their Panache is going to be a lot easier to gain access to. So yeah, all really cool stuff from all the classes that were coming out here. They also made some extra mentions, like for instance, there's going to be now focus items that can give you extra access to essentially focus points, which is very cool. They also made mention of a new core book coming out. This one is coming out in spring next year, and it's called NPC Core. And it's a big book with way too many NPCs. They emphasize the number of NPC options by a lot that your GM can use in your games. It's a book I'm personally super excited for. The sketch cover looks very, very cool. And overall, like anything that gives you more options, and it seems like they have a bit of a name generator in there as well, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's just good. There's going to be more characters for you to interact with. And for all you GMs out there who are looking to run your own games, well, this is going to be a very good book for you, as you're going to have so many different options that you can throw in for your games without having to come up with NPCs by yourself. So that being the case, yeah, NPC core, really, really cool. And the remaster panel was huge, absolutely amazing. A lot of people really liked it, and there's definitely a lot of stuff coming out. I'm super excited for it. NPC core is probably going to be releasing in the like halfway through July or in like the last week of July, as it releases August 1st, but I'll get a copy of it probably at that same time. It'll be released at the same time that it's released to all the subscribers for the Pathfinder's books. So that being the case, so yeah, with that, we're gonna be seeing it here very soon, just like 2 months from now, exactly. Yeah, 2 months from now, about, give or take. We're gonna be seeing all the Player Core 2 options, which I'm very excited for. And there's one more panel I actually did want to cover that is about a book that's coming out, or well, some books that's already out. Is a Tian Xia panel. They talked about a lot of very interesting things, and I felt like it was something I should include in this video as well. So in Tian Xia, they're doing more with martial arts specifically. I don't know if that's going to affect specifically the martial art archetype, or there's going to be new martial arts archetypes. But they did talk about one style called the Titanic Embodiment. It's you get big, you hit hard. They also have a kaiju stance that lets you hit people, creating an impact, like a crater around them. So they really wanted to introduce a lot of the kind of, like Asian culture tropes, fantasy tropes, or just general like martial arts tropes. So a lot of cool things really coming from that. They also are introducing new monk stances, like the rushing goat stance, which gives you bonuses for charging people and doing some massive damage whenever you do so. They also mentioned a new rare archetype called the Cultivator, which allows you to summon spirits. You're about, finding self-perfection. You can gain sanctification, and you can kind of go holy or unholy with it. And they talked a lot about it without giving any real specifics, but Cultivator seems very, very interesting. They do get a lot of cool different features, and with the ability to summon spirits and have sanctification, probably even doing spirit damage, is going to make it a very powerful archetype. They also talked about the new Magus hybrid studies a little bit more. Aloof Firmament is about becoming very light, almost with the ability to fly. It's also focused around the use of one-handed weapons. They didn't really talk about this one too much, but they did talk a lot more about the Unfurling Brocade. Unfurling Brocade, with the art that I have here, is gonna be about essentially using wires and fabrics. So if you like that kind of anime style of using wires to cut people up or to create like fields of hazardous terrain, this is gonna be the one for you. Any kind of fabric or thread that they hold will essentially turn into a bladed scarf that you can trip or grapple people with, which is very cool. And they mentioned that you can use the threads to create like hazardous terrain that will damage people as they move through it. And you can even stand on these threads for tactical advantages. So it's definitely going to be a really cool, probably the cooler one of the two from what they said here, but who knows? I'm very, very excited about it. I hope that maybe along with this, we get some more stuff with the Magus, because I feel like the Magus is still so, it's still so action heavy, and it's still hard to use. Like, it when you have to make a choice between, do I spell strike this round or do I go into Arcane Cascade, it really is a rough one to get into. So that being the case, I'm very much looking forward to it. They also mentioned another new archetype, the Spirit Warrior archetype, which is a one that uses spirits for more offensive and defensive capabilities. You can use weapon attacks and unarmed attacks in tandem with each other, so they really emphasize the use of like one-handed weapons and unarmed striking at the same time. And as well, they mentioned like a feat that you can get with a sword sealing strike that allows you to strike an enemy and they either become like immobilized or restrained or grabbed as a spirit pins them down, which is really cool. So very, very, they have a lot of really cool archetypes coming out with the Tian Xia character guide. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'll be talking about this one in August, so right after Player Core, we're going to be getting a lot more player options in addition, which is really, really cool. They even mentioned inventor options of all things, which I was very surprised about, like the Guardian Lion's Roar, which you know, it looks like in use with the armor inventor item, which I think is super cool. But you shout into it and it creates this big like sonic attack, which seems very interesting. They also mentioned the Duo Dragon Kick, which if you have a construct companion, you both stance up and then you kick an enemy together simultaneously, which is really cool. They were also talking about some new artifacts and items in the book, like Sung Wukong Staff, that you're going to have access to. In addition, they're going to add a few more mundane weapons and probably some other things as well that are very interesting. And they kind of ended off the panel talking about some of the ancestries being a little bit, you know, like they weren't going to talk a lot about a lot of them, but one that was mentioned that I want to make special mention of is the Yaksha. It's a rare ancestry. Apparently, it's very difficult to play as they have certain duties or certain things they have to do. In doing this, they essentially live immortal lives, but well, not immortal, but like they live forever essentially. But the duties they have are very dangerous, and oftentimes not many Yaksha apparently live more than like 100 years anyway. So it's something that is going to give them a lot of power, a lot of ability, and might work very well with Oracle as well if you want to play a super hard mode character who's maxed out to the nines. It's something that's very cool. They also mentioned, I think, a versatile heritage called Hunger Seed, which essentially means you're descended from Oni. You get a lot of cool Oni abilities, a lot of cool ways to smash and bash people. There's a feat called Blood Soaked Dash that they didn't mention what it did, but sounds really cool, as well as Kishin Rage, which allows you, it's their capstone. They become a large creature. They get all kinds of abilities, and they get a precise blood sense that allows them to find anyone who's bleeding. So that being the case, that is pretty much it for what happened during PaizoCon. Now, of course, there's all kinds of bits of information coming out. There's so much information that even in this nearly hour-long recording I'm giving you guys today, I didn't even cover probably half of what was actually mentioned during the panels, but this is at least the most related to player options and direct things that I could find. So, you know, hopefully this gave you a lot of information. You can always check out the Paizo Discord, official Discord, if you want to see like some of the MAA stuff. Or like I said, in my own Discord, someone went and put all the spoilers there. So you can go ahead and look for it there. And yeah, I mean, that's it. I don't feel like I'll be doing another video. I probably should have cut this up into 2 videos if I'm being honest. But I kind of wanted to just do it all in one take just so I could give y'all everything. But that's going to be it for me. Thank y'all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the battle light to me. And hey, let's wait together for all the crazy options coming out for Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Starfinder 2nd Edition. Anyway, bye.